Let us take a quick detour and talk a little bit about root. In Linux, root could refer to more than one thing. There's the root user, the root directory, and the root home. And I'm already confusing you. Let me try to unconfuse you. I know I've been there, I've been in your shoes. That can be a little bit confusing. Let's try to iron this out. Let's start with the root user. In Linux, the root user is the super user. It's just like administrator on Windows. It has the privileges to do anything on the system. And this is important for you to recognize because as a super user, issuing the wrong command could cause a great deal of damage and you'll end up seriously messing your system up. So be careful when issuing commands as root. Usually, you don't want to be running as root because anything that gets executed in your system will be executed as root, which means it will have access to anything it wants. Say, for example, you accidentally download a virus or a malware and you run it by accident. If you run it as root, that means the virus or the malware will get root privileges. So the virus, when it runs, it will run as root. It will have unlimited, unrestricted access to anything in your system. While on the other hand, if you are logged in as a regular user and you do not have super admin powers and you run that virus or that malware might actually break and it might not be able to work because it does not have access to files and folders that it needs access to. The other problem is if you are running something as root and it gets compromised. Let's say you are a web administrator. You're running a web server, you're hosting a website, and that web server is running as root. Then comes an evil bad hacker along the way and breaks into your web server. They would immediately have root access because your web server and your web service are running as root. And you don't want that. This is why Linux systems, including Kali, have moved away from allowing the root user by default. A few years ago, when you set up your Linux system, you would have the option to log in as the root user by default. This no longer is an option. This is why here you see that my username is not root. If you are using the live labs, we have activated the root option for you. So you will see that you are logged in as the root user and you can run commands as root. This is just to add a little bit of convenience for you. But if you set up your own Kali, that wouldn't be the case. Now you might be wondering, what if I have my own Linux and I want to run as root? It's my Linux, I want to break it. Shouldn't this be possible? Yes, of course it's possible. Let's say I'm running this command. You'll understand what this does later on in the course, so don't worry about that. Let's focus on what happens. See that error message here? So what's the solution? I can do one of two things, but they both involve the usage of a command called sudo. Sudo is short for super user do. When I precede any command with the sudo, that command will run with super user privileges. So now if I do sudo before that command, I'm gonna get asked to enter my password. I type my password, not the root password, because I do not know what the root password is. I know my password, so I'm going to type my password, and here we go, it works. The other way of doing this, if you are a little bit lazy, is doing sudo su. Notice now that my prompt changed. So what I'm doing effectively is I'm telling my Linux to super user do, so make me a super user. I have changed now into the root user. The root user's prompt looks like the hashtag, whereas the regular user prompt has the $sign. And I can actually verify this. I can type the ID command, and this shows me what user I'm running as right now. You can see it's root. This is not recommended practice, like I already said. We allow you to do this in the labs because, well, it's the labs. It's meant for practice, and we want it to be convenient for you, so you don't have to keep typing the sudo command. And it's actually something that trips people off when they first start with Linux. I run a command, I get permission denied, and then I remember that I should have preceded it with sudo. So if you're at home using your own personal Kali, please avoid doing that. Avoid going straight into the root prompt. Now to exit the root prompt, you type exit. And now if I type ID, you can see that I'm back to my original user. I did explain very briefly what the su command does. If you want to find out more about any command in Linux, you can pull up its help menu. And the way you do this is you follow the command with -h or --help. So you can do this for pretty much any command if you want to find out more about what the command is, what it does, and how it works. So that was the root user. What about the root directory? This here is where I can see all the directories in my system. And this is what is called the root directory. It's the main directory, or the trunk of the tree, if you will, for anything else that branches out from. Notice that if I try to move up to the parent directory, I cannot, because right now I'm at the top, I'm at the root directory. Think of it as the C drive in Windows. The C drive is where everything else lives and where you find everything else. You start with the C drive and then you can move out or branch out to anything else. Notice this slash. This here indicates the root directory, the trunk of our tree. In Windows, it's C. In Linux, it's the slash. So in Windows, we have something, for example, like C/users/Tarek/documents. This is the path to get to the documents folder. In Linux, it's going to be /home/Tarek/documents. So instead of C in Windows, we have the slash in Linux. This is where everything falls under. So this is my home directory. Now you might be thinking, well, we know that there's a root user, and we know that because we switched into the root user earlier on, but I cannot see the root home. Where is the root home? And this is our third root principle for today. So we've covered the root user, we've covered the root directory, and now we're going to cover the root home. You cannot find the root home under the home directory. For any other user, you can find their home under the home directory except root. For root, here it is. The root home is under the root directory. Now, if I try to browse it, I'm going to get access denied because I do not have permissions to do so. We will see how we can work around this using the command line. To sum it up, we have the root user, we have the root directory, and we have the root home. Now, to avoid confusion, whenever in this course I mention the word root, I'm usually talking about the root user. Unless I specifically say otherwise, I say root home or root directory, I will be talking about the root user.